have you ever been somebody? Have you ever been somewhere where like just there's only one person in your entire life that you actually care about?
Today, we're not telling a story of wilderness survival or televised family unity. Instead, this is a tale of something far more fragile, where the lines between resilience and collapse blur just beneath the surface of the camera lens. Behind the image of an off-grid Wolfpack living in isolation, a quieter reality unfolded over the years, so much so that the version seen on screen and the life lived beyond it no longer align. In fact, before he died, at 43, Wolfpack star Matt Brown admitted how he utterly hated this one person. Today, we'll take a peek behind the curtain and unveil the horrors. The rise of a Bush son. Matt Brown first entered the national spotlight on May 6, 2014, when Alaskan Bush People premiered on the Discovery Channel. The series introduced viewers to Billy Brown, Amai Brown, and their 7 children, Matt, Bam Bam, Bear, Gabe, Noah, Snowbird, and Rain, as a family living deep in the Alaskan wilderness, far removed from modern society. As the oldest of the Brown children, Matt quickly became one of the most recognizable members of the cast. During the show's early seasons, filmed primarily around Hoonah and Chichagof Island in southeast Alaska, he regularly appeared at the center of major storylines involving shelter construction, boat travel, hunting trips, and efforts to establish what the family called Browntown. To millions of viewers, he was presented as a key member of the family's survival operation and one of Billy Brown's most capable sons. Yet even in those early years, the reality behind the reality show was more complicated than what audiences saw on screen. While the series marketed the Browns as a family living in near total isolation, production required camera crews, support staff, transportation logistics, permitting arrangements, and carefully planned filming schedules. The remote locations were real, but so was the extensive production infrastructure needed to capture life there. Matt spent much of this period balancing the role of family member with the role of reality television cast member. This would become increasingly important in later years. Throughout seasons 1 and 2, Matt was frequently portrayed as one of the family's workhorses. He participated in major building projects, wilderness expeditions, and supply runs, often appearing alongside brothers Bam Bam and Bear during physically demanding tasks. The show's narrative repeatedly emphasized the importance of the older sons in helping Billy execute ambitious projects in difficult terrain. Whether constructing cabins, transporting materials, or scouting new locations, Matt was consistently shown as an active contributor to the family's survival-focused identity. The family's profile grew rapidly as the show gained traction. By its second and third seasons, Alaskan Bush People had become one of Discovery's most talked-about reality programs, regularly attracting audiences in the millions. Increased attention brought increased scrutiny. Questions emerged regarding aspects of the family's residency claims and the authenticity of certain elements of the show's wilderness narrative. As filming continued through 2015 and into 2016, the family's center of gravity gradually shifted away from Alaska. Production increasingly focused on Washington state, particularly the North Cascades region and Okanogan County, where the Browns would eventually establish a new homestead. Matt remained a visible part of the transition. Episodes documented the family clearing land, building structures, and adapting to a different environment while attempting to preserve the rugged identity that had made the series successful. For viewers, the move represented another chapter in the family's survival story. For production, it offered a more practical and accessible filming location. At this stage, Matt's public identity remained almost entirely tied to the Brown family brand. He was not presented as an independent personality with a separate storyline, but as part of the collective known as the Wolfpack. His value within the narrative came from what he did, rather than who he was. There were no public signs of a serious conflict. Yet underneath the surface, trouble was boiling, ready to bubble all the way to the top. Addiction, withdrawal, and first collapse. By 2016, the first visible cracks had appeared in Matt Brown's public story. After spending the show's early years as one of the most prominent members of the Brown family's Wolfpack, he entered rehabilitation for alcohol addiction. This was the first major documented interruption in his life on and off camera. That year, he sought treatment in California, including at the renowned Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, a facility that had treated thousands of addiction patients since its founding in 1982. For the first time since Alaskan Bush People premiered in 2014, Matt's storyline was no longer centered on wilderness survival. His departure immediately affected the show's structure. During the first several seasons, Matt had been one of the family's most visible adult sons, regularly participating in construction projects, transportation missions, and hunting expeditions. When he entered treatment, production continued filming, but his absence was noticeable. Responsibilities that had often fallen to Matt were redistributed among brothers Bear Brown, Gabe Brown, Noah Brown, and Bam Bam Brown. The change altered the balance of a television series that had spent years presenting the Brown family as a tightly coordinated unit. Publicly, the family responded with support. Billy Brown openly discussed his son's struggle in interviews, describing addiction as a difficult battle that required professional treatment. Rather than framing the situation as a family dispute, he portrayed it as a health crisis. Discovery Channel's coverage and related media reports similarly emphasized rehabilitation and recovery. At this stage, there were no verified public accusations between Matt and his parents, and no evidence of estrangement. But then, another crisis struck. In April 2017, Amy Brown was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, despite having never smoked. Doctors gave her a very low survival probability, with some reports citing only a 3% chance of survival. Treatment required extensive travel and medical care in Southern California, where Amy underwent radiation and chemotherapy. The diagnosis transformed the family's priorities almost overnight. The timing created enormous strain on the family system. Throughout 2017, Alaskan Bush People continued production, despite both crises unfolding at the same time. Cameras followed the family's relocation efforts and Ami's treatment journey, while Matt's appearances became increasingly inconsistent. In some episodes, he returned briefly and appeared to be reconnecting with family activities. In others, he was absent entirely. By 2018, Matt publicly discussed his sobriety efforts and appeared committed to recovery. However, reports indicated that his struggle had not fully ended. Recovery was proving to be a process rather than a single event. While the rest of the Brown family remained embedded in the show's production schedule in Washington state, Matt's life increasingly revolved around treatment, rebuilding stability, and maintaining sobriety. The gap between his reality and the family's televised narrative gradually widened. Importantly, there was still no verified evidence of a formal break between Matt and his parents during this period. Return, relapse, and the slow exit. When Matt Brown left rehab in late 2016, there were signs that he was trying to reclaim the life he had stepped away from. He gradually reappeared around the Brown family and the world of Alaskan Bush People. But his return was not a return to normal. The Matt viewers had seen during the show's first years, constantly involved in building projects, expeditions, and major family decisions, was no longer consistently present. Instead, his appearances became sporadic, arriving in short stretches before fading again. By 2017, the contrast was becoming increasingly visible. Following Amy Brown's diagnosis, much of the family relocated to Southern California so she could undergo aggressive treatment, including radiation and chemotherapy at UCLA Medical Center. During this period, Alaskan Bush People increasingly focused on Ami's fight for survival, Billy Brown's efforts to hold the family together, and the emotional toll on the siblings. Matt appeared occasionally, but he was no longer a central participant in the family's day-to-day narrative. Unlike earlier seasons, where he regularly featured in major projects, his appearances often felt more like check-ins than reintegration. Episodes showed moments of reunion and family interaction, but rarely placed him at the center of long-term story arcs. While his brothers Bear, Gabe, Noah, and Bam Bam took on increasingly prominent responsibilities, Matt drifted toward the edges of the show's structure. Away from the cameras, Matt spoke openly about recovery. In interviews and later social media posts, he acknowledged that sobriety was not a destination, but an ongoing process. "Recovery is something you have to work at every day," he said in one public discussion about addiction. Entertainment reports from the period repeatedly referenced continued struggles with alcohol dependency, and by September 2018, those concerns became public once again when Matt entered rehabilitation for a second time. He voluntarily checked himself into treatment after recognizing that he was losing control of his sobriety efforts. The timing was significant. By then, the Brown family had largely transitioned its operations to Washington State, where filming centered around the 435-acre North Star Ranch property in Okanogan County. Discovery Channel continued producing new seasons, documenting the family's efforts to build homes, clear land, and establish permanent roots in the Pacific Northwest. The production schedule moved forward regardless of individual circumstances. As his participation fluctuated, other family members naturally absorbed more screen time and responsibility. By late 2018, Matt existed in a strange middle ground. He had not officially left the show, but he was no longer fully embedded within it. Still, there was no verified public evidence of a formal split between Matt and his parents. Billy Brown continued speaking publicly about family unity and perseverance, while Amy Brown focused on rebuilding her health after surviving cancer treatment. The decisive shift arrived in 2019. By that point, Matt had effectively stopped participating in Alaskan Bush People as a regular cast member. There was no dramatic farewell episode, no public firing, and no official announcement declaring his departure. Instead, he gradually disappeared from the show's central storylines. After approximately 5 years on the series, his role simply faded from the production's ongoing narrative. Discovery continued producing new seasons featuring Billy, Amy, Bear, Gabe, Noah, Rain, and Snowbird, while Matt's presence became part of the show's history rather than its future. The family system without its eldest son. By the time Matt Brown effectively disappeared from Alaskan Bush People in 2019, the Brown family's television world had already begun reorganizing itself without him. For nearly 5 years, from the show's premiere in May 2014 through its move to Washington State, Matt had been one of the most visible members of the Brown Wolfpack. But by season 10 and beyond, his role had largely vanished. Matt's exit was not accompanied by a dramatic announcement. There was no official farewell episode, no public firing, and no storyline explaining his disappearance. Instead, viewers gradually stopped seeing him. By 2019, his appearances had become so infrequent that the series effectively continued as though the family structure had naturally adjusted to his absence. Promotional material, cast interviews, and season previews rarely mentioned him, and newer episodes focused almost exclusively on the remaining members of the family. Billy and Amy Brown became even more central. Billy remained the patriarch, narrator, and driving force behind many of the series' major decisions. His vision of family unity, self-reliance, and wilderness living continued to anchor the program's themes. Amy, meanwhile, had become a symbol of resilience after surviving stage 3 lung cancer following her 2017 diagnosis and aggressive treatment in California. Then, on February 7, 2021, the family's foundation suddenly collapsed. Billy Brown died at the age of 68 after suffering a seizure at the family's property in Washington State. His son, Bear Brown, publicly confirmed the death through social media, writing that his father had passed away after a seizure and describing him as their best friend. The announcement shocked viewers because Billy had remained the central figure of Alaskan Bush People since its debut. His death represented far more than the loss of a cast member. It was the loss of the person around whom the family's public identity had been built for decades. Matt had already been absent from the family's television life for roughly 2 years. Communication between him and various family members had become increasingly limited. In the months following Billy's death, Matt publicly discussed his father on several occasions. In one social media video, he indicated that he had been able to find some level of peace regarding Billy before his passing. The family itself continued moving forward. But then, the big reveal came. Claims, counterclaims, and online narratives. Beginning in 2021, Matt started posting videos directly to Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, speaking to viewers without producers, network executives, or family members acting as intermediaries. For the first time since the series premiered in 2014, he was publicly telling his version of events in his own words. And this changed everything. In a series of videos posted throughout 2021 and 2022, Matt alleged that his relationship with the show's production system had been far more complicated than viewers realized. He claimed that he had contributed significantly to the success of Alaskan Bush people, but had not been compensated in a way he believed reflected that contribution. In one widely circulated video, he suggested that while the television series generated substantial revenue, he felt he had received comparatively little control over his own role and future. He also described feeling marginalized within decision-making processes involving both production and family matters. Matt also repeatedly stated that concerns he raised about family dynamics and production issues were often attributed to addiction or mental health problems rather than being addressed directly. He argued that disagreements and frustrations were sometimes dismissed because of his history with alcohol dependency. These claims resonated with some viewers because they fit into a broader narrative of an individual attempting to separate legitimate grievances from the consequences of past addiction. Matt also spoke about what he viewed as an interconnected relationship between family authority and television production. In one of his widely circulated statements, he said, "Everybody's told me that other people's secrets aren't mine to tell, but they're destroying me, and they've been destroying me for a long time." He also alleged that money tied to the series had been controlled within the family structure, with one account noting that he claims that his parents stole the money he had earned for his appearances on TV from him, again grouping Ami and Billy together rather than separating her out as a distinct target. Matt also claimed that he felt misrepresented by the production. He alleged that producers portrayed him as a crazy person. He also made more serious accusations about the filming environment itself, including claims, summarized in reporting, that controlled substances were present or given within that ecosystem, which he linked to his own struggles. He referenced both Billy and Amy Brown when discussing the broader system from which he felt increasingly disconnected. The Discovery Channel did not issue a detailed public response to the allegations. Likewise, there were no widely reported lawsuits resulting in findings that confirmed his claims. Matt's account was just that, his retelling of the situation. But it did show a different perspective on the whole thing. Then things took a turn for the worse. Isolation, addiction, and a tragic end. After stepping away from regular filming on Alaskan Bush people, following multiple publicly documented rehabilitation stays for alcohol addiction, his participation in the series declined until it effectively ended by 2019. With no further sustained on-screen role in the Washington state-based production centered at North Star Ranch. From that point onward, coverage described him as living independently, outside the structured filming schedule that continued to define the rest of the Brown family's televised existence. Public reporting continued to frame his situation through the lens of addiction recovery and relapse. Matt had openly discussed his struggles with alcohol over the years, while the rest of the Brown family continued filming and maintaining the public identity built around the series. Meanwhile, Matt remained largely absent from both the production and family-related media appearances. However, The situation between Matt and his mother, and by extension the rest of his family, only got worse. Then came the moment of true horror. He was reported missing in late May. The initial concern emerged after an unidentified man was reported in the river on or around May 27th, prompting deputies from the Okanogan County Sheriff's Office to deploy boats, sonar equipment, divers, and search teams to the area. Authorities later confirmed that conditions were extremely difficult, with fast currents and rising water levels complicating visibility and recovery efforts. On May 29, 2026, a source close to the family told Us Weekly that the family is not sure what to believe right now, adding that relatives were in contact and speaking to police and waiting to hear. Family members, including Bear Brown, publicly expressed fear that Matt may have died after reports emerged of a man seen floating face down in the river. TMZ additionally reported that a witness described a man entering shallow water before being swept away when observers briefly looked away. Bear Brown began sharing public updates, indicating that the family feared the worst. In social media statements cited by multiple outlets, he suggested that Matt had unalived himself. At the same time, authorities formally suspended portions of the search operation, citing dangerous river conditions and the increasing likelihood that the individual had already been carried downstream. By May 30th, the investigation reached its turning point. After days of coordinated search efforts involving law enforcement, volunteers, and private rescue participants, a body was recovered from the Okanogan River near Oroville, Washington. According to official accounts cited in multiple reports, the recovery was assisted by a small group of private citizens and later confirmed through family identification procedures. Bear Brown publicly confirmed the identification on social media, stating, "They found a body in the river a few hours ago, and it was positively identified as being Matt." Matt's brother, Noah Brown, also played a direct role in the recovery effort and was present at the site when the body was pulled from the water. In the immediate aftermath, law enforcement treated the death as part of an ongoing coroner's investigation rather than a closed case. Early reporting indicated that a firearm was recovered near the scene, and officials noted that preliminary findings suggested the unaliving appears to be self-inflicted. Following confirmation of his death, the Brown family released statements expressing grief and remembering Matt as a creative, intelligent, and deeply curious person who loved the outdoors. Looking back, many observers viewed his story as one of gradual separation from the systems that had once defined his life. Reality television, family identity, and public visibility. What began as a highly visible role within the Wolfpack ultimately became a far more private struggle. And then, it all ended. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.